Well, welcome everyone to the Evolving Man podcast. My name is Alan DeMonts, and I'm the founder of the Awakened Man. You know, if you're a father or you're considering being a father, do you have a role model that you can follow? And even if you do, are there things that you would do differently? I'm sure there are. Here's the thing. Being a father is the most important role a man's going to play in his life. And my guest today has some tips and strategies for being the best father you can be. But before we get into all that, I want to remind you of our brotherhood, the Band of Brothers. This is our group mentoring program of strong, resilient men who are dedicated not only to their growth, but the growth of their brothers. And while that's a phenomenal program, guys, and we get some great results, if you're really interested in raising the standards as a father, a husband, an entrepreneur, then I encourage you to participate in our Heroes Quest. It's a 90-day mentoring program that's aimed to improve at least one aspect of your life. So where can you find all this information? We can find it at our membership site at the Awakened Man Training Academy at members, that's plural, members.theawakenedman.net. And so now let's get on with today's episode.
Today's man knows who he is, where he stands, and what he aspires to become. Solid in his convictions, owner of his destiny, ever evolving into husbands and fathers our wives and children expect and deserve. We are the masters of our life and the leaders of our homes and community. Welcome to the movement. Stay strong, my brother.
And as you know, folks, I like to always start off by asking a couple of more questions. So here we go. So what are the traits of fatherhood that you feel are the most critical? And are those traits that your father had or a father figure that you had in your life? You know what, regardless of however you answer that, I suspect being a father is something many men, while being really excited about, are probably scared shitless. And there's no owner's manual for being dad, right? There just isn't. And then again, now that I say that, I think there just might be. And today my guest is Tim Dunn, and he's going to pass along his wisdom for raising boys and girls, twins and singles, toddlers and teenagers, and just about anything else you need to know about being a dad. So let me just do a little bit more introduction to Tim. Tim is the author of Dad on Purpose and the founder of Dadathlon, a community dedicated to helping fathers achieve balance, strength across all aspects of fatherhood. Welcome to the podcast, Tim.
Thanks, Alan. It's a pleasure to be here. Appreciate it.
Right on. Geez, I was really excited when I came across your page and your information. And so tell us a little bit about what this Dadathlon's all about.
Yeah, it started a long time ago. It actually started as a silly kind of story where my kids were much littler. I've got 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls. I always say it's a nice sampler platter. And it started when I thought, God, it would be great if there was some sort of like competition where one event is, putting the pack and play together. And then the other one is, putting the car seat in. Another one is doing your daughter's pigtails, just super diverse muscle groups of dadness. And, the kids were little then, it was kind of ha-ha. And as I got older and life became more complicated and stressful, it dawned on me that really that same sort of phenomenon is true, just with sort of different events. And instead of, and for me, I did a triathlon a couple of years ago. I didn't do well, but the training for it, swimming is really different than running. It's really different than biking. And you need sort of that balanced strength across different muscle groups. And that those 2 metaphors sort of came together for me. And that's when I realized, wow, I think that's kind of a helpful framework to think about fatherhood. And so for me, I'm not any special guru. I always say it's just sort of learning on the fly and being a seeker, a fellow seeker of wisdom, mostly of what doesn't work and the lessons that I've learned from that. And for me, the 3 events that I kind of identify were connecting with our kids and our wife, providing, for, our goals and our sort of resources, and then living a healthy, joyful life that's fulfilling. And so that's kind of how that came about.
Cool. That's so cool. You're absolutely right. I love the metaphor of the triathlon and the dadathon, the things that all the aspects that it takes for us to be good fathers. Right. And we just don't think about that. And like I said, I think there really isn't an owner's manual, and you've really started to set that foundation. So let's talk a little bit about your book now, Dad on Purpose. So I guess you started a little bit about why you wrote the book, but tell us a little bit more about why you decided that, I'm going to take this experience and I'm going to put it in a book.
Yeah, it began as something I was really doing for myself. I know on an earlier podcast you mentioned The 7 Habits Highly Effective People, which is a book that I love, and you gave a shout out to, I think, what was habit number 2, which was beginning with the end in mind. And I think for me, I'm not sure I'm unique in this, but for me, by the time I've fallen off the wagon before I got to chapter habit 2. Be proactive is habit 1, and I think a lot of times we're just sort of going through the motions. Go to work, pay the bills, drive the kids to practice and recitals, and wake up the next day and repeat. It's very Groundhog Day. And I think when I think about that, for me, I kind of was in that rut. I was listening to all kinds of podcasts and books and reading all kinds of stuff and never actually doing anything. And there's a phrase, I wish I knew who said it, and I can find it maybe later, but someone who said something like, if you aim for nothing, you'll hit it every time. And for me, I was just kind of going through the motions. I needed to be proactive. I needed to do something and be a better dad on purpose and pick the things that I wanted to do. And so I wanted to do that for me. And as I was talking about that with my wife and with some of my buddies, they're like, there's some stuff in there. Maybe other people, if I'm feeling that, I'm human just like everyone else, maybe some other people might find some value in it. So that was kind of the genesis of the project.
Cool.
And again, it doesn't pretend to be exhaustive or sort of professional or holier than thou at all. And my favorite, the paragraph I've gotten the most feedback on is at the beginning. I say, look, it's not holier than thou. Let me just list for you some of the things I've messed up, just so we know I'm approaching this with humility and with a curious mind and that kind of perspective. So.
Well, I just love that. I really enjoyed your, the title of the book, because one of our mantras here with the Awakened Man is about living a life of purpose on purpose, right? And I think how many times that you said we just kind of go through the motions in life, and we're just living day to day, and we're not really paying attention to it. So I really like how you had put some purpose into the reason for writing the book. Now you did touch a little bit earlier, but about how you had broke the book into 3 parts. Now you call these things being Dadness. I thought that was pretty cool too, the Dadness aspect. So how did you come up with them, and how can fathers build them into their lives? And I think they said the first one was connection, right?
Yeah. It started really kind of as brainstorming. It's funny, in the initial sort of 1.0 version on the piece of paper, I was thinking more like decathlon, like in the Olympics, in the 10 events. And I was like, how can I get it down to 10? And it's the same with moms as well. But, and you can argue there's plenty of other aspects of dadness and muscle groups of dadness that are still worthy. But for me, I brought it down to these 3 buckets of 3 each. And it revolved around loving. So the connecting ones are, how can we better love on purpose our children, our sons and our daughters, both our children, but sort of some of the strategies maybe a little bit different. And then our wife or partner, is another one. The second bucket is that sort of providing, which involves I broke that down into execution, which is goal setting good habits, and that are specific and clear, and then sort of 2 financial ones that I broke up into defense and offense when it comes to dollars. So defense is protecting the money going out the door, and budgeting is in there a little bit, but we do it a different way. And then offense is bringing money in the door. What are some strategies, whether it's side hustles or places you can kind of sell stuff that's lying around the house, that kind of a thing. And then finally, the the last 3 chapters revolve around, I called it living, and just having life that is worth ourselves. Mm-hmm. We want to be healthy. We want to be around for our children and for our grandchildren, and have joy and capture the joy, and have wisdom and learn and pass along these lessons, not only for our kids, but also for ourselves. And so, again, it just felt there was a symmetry to sort of the 3 groups of 3 that resonated with me. And for me, I feel like those were my most important buckets.
Yeah, I thought those buckets were outstanding. And I like that you separated, the connection with their sons and daughters, because it is different, isn't it? And you go a little bit into how that is balanced as a father. And I wonder if you could share a little bit, like tips between how you are connecting with your daughters versus your sons.
Yeah, well, I think it's funny at different ages. I think it's different. My kids now, I have a 18-year-old daughter, and then 16-year-old boy-girl twins, and a 12-year-old boy. And so, connecting with my teenage daughters is a lot different than it was connecting with my 5-year-old daughters, and the same thing with the son. So I think it's just, for me, I think the common thread among both of them is just sort of is listening and being present, choosing to be present with your time is the common thread for all three, sons, daughters, and your partner. And so I think with daughters, it's maybe a little bit more conversational. There's a great book that I reference in there that's about conversation starters. And I started doing that with my daughters, and we just go get coffee, and, you kind of go through the chapters, and there's these prompts, well, what do you want to do when you grow up, and that kind of stuff, but it gets into much more detail. And it's a little uncomfortable at first for me as a guy who's not so much a talker in that sense. But they really liked it. And so much so that, a couple of times they've come back and be like, hey, when's the next time we're going to do that? And I didn't do that. That wasn't by design, but I feel like anytime someone's child is coming to them and saying, let's do that again, something's going right. So I stumbled across something nice on that one. And then with the boys, there's a little bit of that, but I think it's just more sort of, active time, and let's kind of go do stuff. And it's both of the chapters are set up the same way, with sort of how we want to, do things together, books we can read, things we can watch, things we can play, how we can write to them. So both chapters are set up sort of similarly in terms of the structure, how exactly those manifest. Just specifically, I try to have the book be as useful as possible. Not a lot of theory, but like, hey, do this, watch this, check this out. Like, I wanted them to be punchy, specific ideas that you can do on a Thursday with your daughter or son, so.
Yeah, that's what I really liked about reading going through the book there and seeing that everything was very practical. Like, it was obvious that this is something that while you reference some books and to help guys get an understanding of how to get started, everything was real life experience for you. These are things that you actually have done and have worked. And I think that's what's so cool about it. And the other thing that comes to mind in listening to you talk about the book and skimming through it is knowing that, like, you really set the foundation for what your sons and your daughters, like, as a role model of what it means to be a man. And I think that's so important for our children today. And I'm a father. My kids are 25 and 29, or 26 and 30, I guess now. And so they're a little bit older, right? And living their own lives. And this is some of the stuff that I wish I would have done when they were at that age, right? And you're already modeling this behavior, right? So it's such a great presence.
Yeah, and well, first off, I don't pretend to be the guy who's always modeling excellent behavior. I do my best, but that's actually the thing too that I make the comment is that they're watching us both times. They don't shut their ears and eyes off when we screw up. In fact, they're probably watching us harder then. And so I discussed this. I think I maybe discussed this in the chapter about connecting with mom. Is that, like, or when we mess up, it's important for us to acknowledge that right and do that right. I always think back to I don't know if these commercials ran in Canada, because I think you're in Edmonton, is it?
Winnipeg.
There? Winnipeg. I'm sorry.
That's all good.
There were commercials in the 80s down in the U.S. where the guy comes into the room and he says he's got a thing of drugs, and he shows it to his son and he says, "Where did you learn to do this?" And there's this awkward pause, and the son says, "You, Dad, I learned it from watching you." And the big tagline is, parents who do drugs have children who do drugs. And I think the takeaway from that sort of cheesy public service announcement circa 1986 is that parents who do anything have children who do that. And so we just have to be mindful of that. And I think, and the flip side of that is, for our daughters, be the man you want your daughter to marry. I think is every bit as much of a worthy model aspiration as being the human being that you want them to be, which is obviously also important.
Absolutely right, and that is just so powerful. And I like that you touched on the mom chapter as well, because I really like the bits and pieces in there. I think it was in the mom chapter where you talk about having a house that's like a business partnership, right? And that we're equals, and how things are divided, and how you connect, and how you connect as a couple, I think is also important for our children to see. How does dad react to mom? How does dad treat mom? And vice versa, right? And I think you had some really practical stuff in there as well in that chapter as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I think for me, speaking from, and again, I can only really speak from my experience, but when I've spoken to other people about it, I've gotten some amens, like, oh, it's kind of like my experience. Well, like, I think it's real easy for dads. This is kind of related to the proactive comment to kind of just sort of punt or kind of look away. Mom handles a lot of the kind of all that kind of stuff. And I think that was in that chapter at the beginning of the chapter where we had the little parable of the business partner. And then, someone offers you or your wife $10,000 to answer one question about your family, and they take $10,000 away from you if you get it wrong. Who do you decide should answer the question, and who does she decide should answer the question? And you probably will both pick the same person. And not that that's neither good nor bad, but it's probably worth reflecting on why that is, and whether or not you were as much of a business partner in that relationship as sort of an employee of the business. And I think that's for me, that was someplace that I was in trying to be better in terms of that with my wife.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that example is so grounded in that it really forces you to understand, like, how present am I in this relationship? Am I really paying attention to what's going on? Because you're absolutely right. When I was reading that, I thought, geez, I probably would ask my wife to be the one to answer that. There's some things I need to hone my skills on. So let's go a little bit further into the book. So what chapters are resonating most with your audience that you would say so far?
Yeah, I think it depends a little bit. We can chat a little bit more about it later. We have a dad quiz that we invite our readers to take that kind of gives them guidance into kind of which area they might naturally, based on kind of their own self-assessment. It's just a brief self-assessment, which area kind of they might start on. We can talk a little bit more about that in a little bit if you'd like. But in terms of the chapter, I think that I've been speaking about the most has been the one on execution, which is chapter, I think, 5. It's the first chapter of the providing section, and I think it's because it's the resources within there are sort of applicable across a lot of environments. Whether you're trying to do something for your health, or connect better with your children, or save money, like the skills there of sort of setting goals and picking one and focusing and developing habits are broadly applicable. So I think in that sense, it seems to be the one that resonates the most with people that seem to have some more value.
Right on. Excellent. And so what is the biggest takeaway that you're getting from your book?
I think for me, the lesson that I messed up in my own life a lot was to try to do everything at once. And I think, and not that multitasking is a myth, because people multitask. It's, that just is it's a fact that they do that. But I think the quality of what we're able to produce is going to be much better if we do one thing at a time. And if we're going to multitask, I think my takeaway is to not do things concurrently, but do them consecutively, effectively. And so for me, in my own life, when I just pick one thing and get that right, and then do the next thing and get that right, and then do the next thing and get that right, and I stack those habits on top of each other, then it snowballs in a more effective and sustainable way than it would be if I was just doing whack-a-mole the whole time and measuring where I was at the end of 3 months of both of those strategies. So for me, I think the biggest takeaway is pick one thing that's the first thing you want to work on, do it until it's automatic, and then repeat with the next thing.
Yeah, I love that. That's an outstanding strategy. I think it's so true. And you're absolutely right. All of us multitask, and we do that, pretty much all day long. But when we really want to get something done, and we want to get it done well, then focusing on the one thing makes total sense. And I completely support that. So what's the biggest lesson you've learned as being a dad?
I think there's a lot. Humility is probably really darn close to the top of the list, but I think we can all say that. Maybe that's sort of a cop out. But in terms of things that help me be a better father as I reflect on it, I'd say there's 3 things, and some of them are sort of woven in the book here and there. But I'd say the first thing is progress is better than perfection. With social media and everything that's out there, I've had this conversation with my wife and with my kids. What we think of as other people's perfection isn't even really them. It's just this Frankenstein that's made up of the best 5% of everybody that we know, and that's what's on social media. And that's the weird, false version of perfection that we're measuring ourselves against. But better than yesterday is the metric that we should be concerned about, not better than that guy or whatever. So for me, that's the one thing the first of my kind of three big takeaways. The second one is action is better than analysis. I mentioned earlier, like I was a big consumer, I still am, of podcasts and of audiobooks and of regular books and of YouTube videos on self-improvement and this and that. And like, I read them all, or I've read a lot of them. And, you can have all the knowledge in the world and not do anything about it. And you're just as much better off as someone who didn't read anything and didn't do about it, anything, didn't act on it. So taking some action, I think is key. And last year for me, that was the year where I took to write this book and kind of set that in motion for me. Felt like that first big step. And one metaphor I've used is, if you've got the bicycle, and I can learn everything I need to know about the bike, but I can't steer it until I start pedaling. You got to be moving to steer. And I might start in the wrong direction. That's okay. Move, like steer a bike, it's fine.
Yeah.
And then the final thing is small is bigger than big, which sounds weird. I get it. But getting a cadence of small things in the can when it comes to building habits, for me, like exercising, just say I'm going to run 5 minutes a day. I can do 5 minutes a day every day and not have to worry about fitting it in and taking a shower and I've got to call in a dentist appointment. 5 minutes. And then I can string that consistency together and then it kind of bakes that habit in. And most days I'll probably end up doing 20 anyway. Yeah. But on those days that I have 5, I've built that habit in. So those are the three things that I think I've learned most from being a dad. And the bonus round is that we touched on this as well, is that whether we're doing those 3 things right or we're screwing up, they are watching, and they're watching for good and for ill. And we owe it to them to give them the best version of ourselves and to own it when we can't, and to learn from it and to learn in front of them.
Absolutely. Well, you're giving that vulnerability, right? Allowing yourself to fail and not trying to be perfect. And I love that, progress over perfection. It's a great mantra to have. Love that for sure. So what advice do you have for that overwhelmed dad who just doesn't know where to begin?
Yeah, for me, I would just say, just breathe for a minute. There's so much going on. There's so much stress and so much stimuli in the world. And these last couple of years have not helped improve that much. And I think just pause and breathe and take a second and then realize that you don't have to do it all at once. And a little bit like progress is greater than perfection, but just like, pick one thing and move forward on that and make progress on that. And for me, a lot of the most common thing, the first thing that I think of and the most common thing that I've heard in feedback from other dads is one of the things that they struggle with most is the balance. And when you're out of balance, when there's multiple variables, you want to fix them all. But really the best way is to fix the one that's most out of whack first. Focus on that. Yeah, do whatever you need to maintain these. Bring this back into whack. I'm not sure that's an expression, but bring this thing into whack, and then kind of see where you are. Pause and take another look around. Like, do I have to still work on this? No, this is good. What's my next most out of whack thing? Work on that. And so I think slow down and assess is probably the best piece of advice I give. And then just do the one thing I think of. I think it's City Slickers, where Jack Palance is the old cowboy who Billy Crystal can't quite get to. Is what's the secret of life? One thing. So it's sort of a modified version of that. I think maybe he was his version, his interpretation might be a little bit different.
Yeah, no, what a great man Palance was, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So what's beyond the book? Are you planning any more books? Are there resources? Like what's the next phase now for Dad on Purpose?
Yeah. So honestly, for me, the biggest thing is I want to kind of continue to build and grow the community, either on Facebook or on Twitter. We have the website, dadathlon.com, which is Dadathlon. And ideally what I'd like to do, I've got a few ideas kind of floating around my head in terms of, the next thing could be house-athlon, like how to manage the house or college, social media, something for mom. There's a lot of options, but what I'd like to do is, of course, focus on one, but what I want to get feedback from people. What is the thing that they struggle with the most? And so when I have sign-ups on my website to get a newsletter, an optional question is, what's the biggest thing, for you? Is it balance? Is it health? Is it college? Is it, I want to really find out from dads what it is that they're struggling with and learn together with them. And then build a community where we can kind of support each other and provide resources that are valuable to them in that regard.
Right.
And not big giant tomes, but like quick hit things that you can use on Tuesday and then on Saturday and then next week. That's sort of because, again, we're all busy. I don't have time to read a giant, huge book, which is one of the reasons that we started with the Dad Quiz. This book, it's not, this book isn't huge. It's got 11 chapters, 3 chapters of 3 of sort of the meat of the content. But for people who are busy, the Dad Quiz is a great way. So if you go to dadathlon.com/dadquiz, well, actually, I think maybe you can take the quiz there, but I think I was going to have a special offer for your audience as well to take it.
Let's get into it.
Okay. So what I think I might do instead, so dadathlon.com/dadquiz is available, but for the special people on the Evolving Man podcast, I'm going to create a page called dadathlon.com/evolvingman.
Yeah.
And on that page, you can take the Dad Quiz there, and then also you'll get some free bonuses. I thought maybe what I could do is provide free copy of chapters 1 through 3 of the book for people to kind of take a look, and if it's for them, great. Another thing that you would get would be I don't know if this has ever happened with you guys, but when it's movie night and we're trying to watch a movie that's good for the kids, we can never come up with an idea that's a good movie. So we spend 20 minutes figuring that out. So I put together a list of over 200 movies, and they're sorted by genre, by age, by gender, by category. Is it action or cartoon? Is it a Disney movie? Is it a deep cut? And there's over 200 of them there. That it's just kind of a menu that makes it easier to kind of wean it down rather than scrolling through a million best family movie websites that you've probably done 100 times. And then finally, that would that would put you on our newsletter list where we send out. It's not over the top. We probably average once a week. We do sort of a medium-sized one, and then a few nuggets during the week. Again, similar kind of things that we're trying to deliver to people.
Nice.
And then also on the Dad Quiz, I don't think I rounded that around. It's a 3 to 4 minute quiz of maybe 20, 25 questions that are, occasionally, rarely, sometimes never, those sorts of questions.
Cool.
And you'd get customized results based on what you say is the situation in your life. It'll give you some guidance in terms of which area, which muscle group, which dad muscle group should you focus on first? And then maybe, hey, start with that chapter in the book if you get the book. So.
Cool. Well, Tim, thank you so much for spending time with me today. We unpacked quite a bit, and hopefully we're able to shed some light on what fatherhood's all about and being a dad on purpose. And so thanks for sharing that. I'll put all this information in the show notes when we get to publish this podcast. So it's dadathlon.com/ and then I'll have Evolving Man and other stuff. I'll have that in there. So grateful that you were able to spend time with me today. You're doing some great work, Tim, and really appreciated having you on the podcast.
Thanks so much, Alan. I really appreciated being here, and it's nice to chat with you. Thank you.
Right on.
Thank you for listening to the Evolving Man podcast. Are you ready to own your destiny? To become more the man you are destined to be? Join the brotherhood that is The Awakened Man at theawakenedman.net and start forging a new destiny today.